joined by Andy George, who is the president of the National Black Policing Association and an inspector in the PSNI. Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Grace. It's good to be here.
So I guess I'll just get straight into it and we'll have a little nice conversation and you can tell us about you and your life and things that we need to know.
Yeah,
So the first question that I have is, what was it like growing up for you?
it was different. I was born in 1979, probably during just the height of the Troubles. So growing up in that troubled environment, where I suppose there was a big sectarian divide. Being the only person from an ethnic minority, really, largely anywhere I went, in school, I was the only person from an ethnic minority. Playing football, I was the only person from an ethnic minority, so it was quite difficult. Um, the first time I suppose I noticed that I was different, because as children, we're just born into the world as we are. We don't know what's right and wrong, and everything for me is taught. So, first time I ever knew about racism was when I was 6 years old. I was at the circus with my cousin, and got sort of volunteered to go up into the big top with the clowns. They asked for three volunteers, three young people. I, at 6 years old, was dying to go up and wanted to be in there in the middle of the whole big top part of the show, really excited. And they moved along the line on each child, and then they got to me, name. I'd whispered back, it's Andy. And then next thing, pause for a few seconds, and all of a sudden they come out with, this is sausage, welcome sausage. Like, that's not the name I told you. And it sat for a while. The whole big top were laughing. So there were everybody that was there were just laughing continuously.
Oh God.
Thinking this was quite funny. And for me at 6 years old, it feels like that big top's me coming down on top of you. So it does as a
Mm.
child. The only person that's different. That was the first time I realised I was different, and it took me a while even to realise why they were calling me sausage. And I realised then it was because of the colour of my skin. And I was from then on, I suppose I didn't realise I was very different to others in school. And again, it's probably like anybody from an ethnic minority growing up in Northern Ireland. I am dual heritage, mixed race, so dad's Malaysian and mum's white Northern Irish. So I suppose we grew up in an all white environment. Dad was the only person from an ethnic minority, as well as my brothers and sisters in time. So that was what we grew up in, to a almost purely white background. All of my aunties and uncles, most of dad's relatives were still over in Malaysia. So I didn't get to see the Malaysian side of me. And as I was growing up, people probably I tried to assimilate too much. I didn't eat curry as much as what I probably should have, and I didn't want to do anything that made me more ethnic. I wanted to really push my
Mhm.
Northern Irish roots, and really say that I love growing up in Northern Ireland. I love being Northern Irish, but there is people that just will not accept me for who I am and will not accept the Northern Irish side of me. As I said, particularly from a mixed race background, it's almost difficult because I am half Northern Irish, born in Northern Ireland, so fully Northern Irish in some ways, but from an ethnicity point of view, it's half Northern Irish, and people don't see that half. So there's a lot of confusion, getting bullied, and obviously a lot of racial names in school and stuff like that by some people, by a minority, I would say, but that minority was quite difficult to obviously overcome, and it was difficult
Mm.
because a lot of people didn't really stick up during primary school, and I remember by three guys P7, and they racially abused me, pushed me, I fought back, and then it was me that was punished for fighting back. So I wasn't allowed to play football that afternoon. So for me, it was kind of, well, if nobody's understanding this, I'd go home, I'd tell mum all about it, and she would be like, well, you just call him Snowflake back. And you're like, they're just that complete. She just could not understand what it was like for somebody to kind of say and say really that you're not welcome, because that's the big difference between racism and any other name calling that you're going to get at a young age. It's what they say whenever you're racist is that the whole question that all of us get is, where are you from? I'm like, I'm very much from Ireland, but where are you really from? And I'm like, well, no, I'm really from Northern
It's
Ireland.
always the where are you really from
Exactly. I'm like,
second,
well, no,
like,
I'm really from Northern Ireland, or even whenever they tell you to go home. And I'm like, well, no, I grew up in Craigavon, or I was born in Craigavon. And, for me, I don't really want to go back to Craigavon to a certain degree. So I don't, but that's
yeah.
home for me. So it's not actually as far away as what most people would think. But that continued
Mm.
on. A lot of people, I probably found sport to be my savior that way. I was the eldest in the family, so I was the one that was breaking through everywhere. People were getting used to me, I suppose. And then as we moved into primary school, I had my younger siblings coming in, so I was able to look after them a lot more. But sport for me, playing football in primary school, I was always good at sport, and that probably allowed me to have that feeling of belonging, that camaraderie, and some of those people that I was playing with really probably standing up for me a lot more. More so, I suppose, as I moved into the bigger school and the grammar school, it was just a completely different environment. A lot of people, there was racism, there was not so much bullying because they wouldn't have put up with it the same, but having 14 other rugby players with you, whenever somebody racially abuses you, it kind of freshens the mind of those that are going to be abusing you.
Mm.
Whenever there's 14 burly guys standing beside you saying what did you call them? So that was probably for me, moving up. It was a mixed reaction because I had lots of great friends, and really that sense of belonging was there most of the time. But a lot of the time, then again, as well, it was just very much you don't belong here, go home. And it's that real, I suppose, clash of sense of identity that I think a lot of
Mm.
people from mixed race backgrounds in particular have, because you're not quite, you almost straddle the kind of the border of both ethnicities, and you can't quite understand it. And then dad was a little bit more withdrawn as well, so I didn't quite get the support from that end, and what it was like. Obviously, I have as I grew up, but whenever I was younger, it was definitely difficult.
Yeah, I have a sorry to jump in there, but I find it very interesting when I meet people who are mixed race. And I always want to know how did your parents meet?
Just out in the town they grew up in. Dad was over here working and met mum, and then that was it. They kind of fell for each other, ended up having me, and that's why he stayed. I think they went to live period, but then come back, and
Mm,
then just dad had made his life here. So it was just while he was out through
awesome.
work and met her.
And you said you have do you guys look alike? Do you look different?
I would say, well, I have, well, I had two younger sisters and a brother. There was my sister Sarah, brother Stephen, and then my youngest sister Victoria. Sarah would probably a lot of time would have seen us as twins. There's only a year and 3 months between us, so we do quite look quite alike. Stephen's 6 foot. He's relatively skinny. I'm 5'8" and relatively stocky. So, and then Vicky, she ended up, unfortunately, she died back in 2010. She ended up taking her own
Okay.
life. And again, I think a large part of racism and around the lack of that feeling of belonging. She was the youngest. She was
Yeah,
softer. She grew up, I suppose, being quite soft and wanting everybody to be her friend. And I
yeah,
suppose the biggest bit that she didn't get was she would start calling herself names just to fit in with me, and that carried on. She had a
yeah.
lot
You
of
kind of
different
just
issues.
think, oh, if I say it, then I don't feel anything by it because it's met and I fit in.
Completely, but it's that kind of outward external smile hides an awful lot of deep rooted issue. It's definitely played a factor in that sense of belonging and where she was. And I would say to her constantly, if you don't want people to call you those names, don't call them yourself. You have to take that
Mm.
stand for me. But again, as I said, unfortunately, just over time, she tried it a few times and then eventually was successful in 2010. So that for me is probably what drives me on, if I'm honest. For that push for equality. If I can prevent the death of one young person like that, or if I can push to be there and be supportive of whoever I have to in my role at the minute. That's for me the kind of that's the driving force. And again, for me, it's my experiences. As I said, it's people can be quite racist, and sometimes they don't always think that they are. But I think most people, once they meet somebody from a different background in Northern Ireland, the majority of times they do learn to accept you. It's all of those
Mm.
myths, information, stereotypes that are out there, and all of the negative kind of portrayals of people from ethnic minorities in society in general in suppose the last 10 years. That's what's
Yeah,
fueled a lot of this stuff. But I think I'm just a never optimist. For me, I think there's good in everybody, and I think there's good across the board, and it's just a matter of tapping into that, promoting that kind of side of the experiences that I've had. I never let the negative tear me down. So I don't know. I have had quite a few negative experiences, even through life and different things. But for me, the negative, it's they always say anger's like taking a pill and taking it to hurt the other person. It's only you that's going
Yeah.
to suffer from it. So it's about channeling that energy into the positive. And as I said, it's for me 10% of the society are completely racist, and it's at 80% in the middle that we have to work on. Because for me, I think you win hearts and minds over really easily if you just expose particularly people to different people from different backgrounds. And I do think the
Yeah.
young people are the future, and kind of have the hopes of all of us there of
Yeah.
an equal society.
Yeah. Awesome. Andy, so can you tell me a little bit about your career? Like, when did you get started? Talk me through all of the career stuff.
Well, yeah, well, growing up, I always wanted to be a police officer. A lot of my dads and uncles were police officers, so I grew up in stories of what I knew had that firm background on what policing was. And whenever I left school, I basically applied straight away. It was either fly helicopters with the RAF or go to the police, and it was probably go to the police after. I didn't get into the RAF then, so I didn't. So applied for that at the same time as the police, and thankfully got into the police. So I turned 20 in October, November. So I was in quite young. A lot of people would say, well, some people would say it's too young to go into policing because at 20 years old, you're going to domestic violence incidents, you're going to extreme fights, and people. One of the calls I first went to, I think 5 days in the job, was some guy with a pickaxe handle that had smashed the table, that was beating the bin, and that had glass to his throat. So me at 20 years old was having to talk that person down. A lot of people would say at 20 years old,
Mhm.
you can't really, how do you have the life skills to do that? But for me, my life was different to a lot of other people. I had a lot of experiences that I had to grow up quite quick. I had to understand how people function, because at times, I suppose for me, if I was standing in a bar or in a social setting, I was looking around me, hyper vigilant, I suppose, to a certain degree already, seeing whether people were
Yeah.
going to assault me or whether they were going to actually start on me, because it happened quite a lot. So it probably made me a decent police officer. Playing rugby as well had a big grounding on that as well. But got into the police. At that time, I was probably one of about 10 to 15 officers from an ethnic minority and about 13,500 police. So
What?
quite, yeah, completely like hen's teeth. I didn't see, again, I didn't really see anybody else from an ethnic minority a lot of the time. So I didn't.
Mm.
Fortunate enough, whenever I got my first station was Oma. The first station I went to, there was an inspector that was from an Asian background. So it kind of made you feel a bit more connected, I suppose, you're a bit more supported. But
Yeah, you're not
obviously,
alone.
well, that's the big thing, and I suppose that's where the National Black Police Association. But going through the training centre, I did receive racism from colleagues, unfortunately.
Oh, wow.
Going not not completely going through it as it happened. People had said different things, but that carried on. Went to my first station, and as I said, these are experiences that I had all the time. There was people just didn't know what to make of me. Even in Oma, a smaller town, I was probably one of the few ethnic minority members of the public, let alone somebody in the police service. So seeing me, it's colleagues. It was a bit of a strange kind of thing, I suppose they had to get used to, and it took them a while. Members of the public as well. Some of those criminal elements definitely got into me for being an ethnic minority and being different, and got a lot of racist abuse. But again, over time, they got to know me, and I overcome that bias. I was able to kind of speak to them, and I'd actually have some of the criminals actually defending me over a period of a year. But I think though, whenever I look at it, I stayed home probably for 7, 8 years, and I probably stayed there because I didn't want to have to go through that painful process of getting to know everybody else again and starting over.
Yeah.
People accepted me, people knew me because I've been in there for so long, and I think finding finding that commonality with others from ethnic minorities was really a big thing. So that 2008 then. So I joined in 1999, second last RUC squad. So went through a big change period, obviously, for the patent reforms and all of the stuff that changed the RUC to the PSNA. So within 2 years, I suppose we had a uniform change. We had a change of identity and symbols and the badge, the name. and a positive discrimination as well, obviously, for the increase of Catholic representation. When I joined the ethnic minority population, I think that was the first time that it was ever actually counted in the census data in 2001 in Northern Ireland, and it was only 0.5% of the population were from an ethnic minority. So that's where I fell into in that kind of bit working as well. Catholic representation in the police service was only about 8% compared to about 45% of the population as a whole. And over 10 years, we went from 8% to 32%. So I got to see that big change. I got to sit in the police car with people that had a completely different outlook and experience to me. That I think allowed me to kind of understand what diversity means in general, because
Yeah.
I would never have had those experiences. I probably would have had a majority viewpoint and carried that majority viewpoint throughout my career. I hadn't have been exposed to so many people from a different background. As I said, for policing in Northern Ireland, it only got better because of it. Once you have a police service that's more representative of the communities we serve, and there's certainly more work to be done both for Catholics, females, and for ethnic minorities. But for me, having a more represented police service, that's what gives legitimacy. That's what makes all of society, I suppose, feel connected and feel that the police service that they have is for them and for everybody in society, and that kind of probably has carried through. So that was me up to about 2008 in Oma. Then 2008 I thought was going to be a really big year. Got my sergeant's exam. I was only 28 at the time. Passed all my sergeant's stuff.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well, it passed it back then. Didn't get it in the end. They took it off all of us. 200 of us promoted that year for some reason, and they didn't have an promotion process until 2015. But I was one of the people that fell within that. But I also got to join the Armed Response Unit, which is probably the best time and probably best time from the working environment, from working with the colleagues and friends in the Armed Response Unit, but a bad time from management decisions and being overlooked for a lot of stuff. I ended up
Mm.
getting into the Armed Response Unit. There's only about 60 people in the whole of the police that are actually trained up to do the armed response role. And within that, I got to be an operational firearms commander, which allowed me to lead the teams in the operation on the ground. So again, there was only constable wise at the time, I was probably one of about 5 or 6 people that had that qualification, and I was the only one that had the sergeant's exam and the operational firearms commanders. So that should have meant that I got promoted, but I was overlooked, continued on, ended up having to get a tribunal because of it, which was sorted out. But that continued on. I was overlooked again continuously, despite being highly commended and commended for. I was highly commended in 2015 for an incident up at the Ardoyne where somebody drove over a group of young girls. Ended up hitting me as well. I dislocated my knee, but stayed on duty for another 3 hours. Helped lift the vehicle off the young girl, protected the driver beforehand, and got him out of harm's way, and then lifted the vehicle and stayed on with a crowd of 200-300 coming down. There's pictures of me actually getting punched in the face. So there is by 2 or 3 people that had made it down to the car as I'm trying to hold them back from the driver and keep him safe. Dragged him down, got back up as I said, and it wasn't until I got back to the station and took my pads off that I started to feel my knee sore. And then for that
Mm.
I was probably off for about a year, just over a year. I was off for 6 months. Then I was back on light duties for about 7 or 8. Had to get operated on. Got back into the armed response unit, and then at that stage went for fast track promotion, and that then got me to where I am now as an inspector. Within 2 years, so we've done that, and then as I said, the National Black Police Association role come up at the same time. So I joined the Ethnic Minority Police Association, which is a staff association in the PSNI, which is for Black, Asian, minority ethnic officers and staff members. So it kind of brings them together. So it does allows them to share experiences and just for us to support each other. As I said, there's this
Mm.
minute in time, there's only 41 officers from an ethnic minority in the PSNI. That's in around about 7,000 police officers. So it's 0.5% of the working force. That's compared to 1.8% at the last census. And again, there's estimates that it's 3.5 to 4% from an ethnic minority in Northern Ireland when we do this year's census. But yet we've yet to find that out. But if that is the case, we're at the minute 3 to 4 times underrepresented for ethnic minorities,
Mm.
potentially moving up to 7 or 8 times underrepresented, which could leave
Oh,
us
wow.
the most underrepresented police force for ethnic minorities in the UK. So it is, and And I said that the AMPA, I kind of joined them, got to be their vice chair quite quick, and then started working with the National Black Police Association. National Black Police Association is it's like an umbrella national association which brings all of the local black police or ethnic minority associations together. So I'm now sat as their
Okay.
president. I've sat as their president for the last year, coming up in July, and that as president, it's obviously first time anybody from PSNI has ever been in that kind of leadership role. As president, I represent over 50 law enforcement and police forces across the UK. I represent all 43 police forces in England and Wales, Police Scotland, Police Service of Northern Ireland, the National Crime, British Transport Police, and the Ministry of Defence Police. So I represent all of them on a national level.
Oh my God, you're blowing my mind a little bit. That's amazing.
Yeah, and from a Northern Ireland perspective, it's the first time I'm one of the few Asian officers that have actually got to be the head of the National Black Police Association, but I'm also first mixed race person, definitely the first person from Northern Ireland ever to hold that position. But again, what that's done,
Mm.
that's also then highlighted some of the things that some of the good stuff they're doing on a national level, but it's also allowed me to bring some of the learning back and to try and push for change internally at PSNI as well. The goal isn't just about supporting those people. It's around about 5,000 members or so we have, I think, on estimate. And within, I meet the National Police Chiefs Council, I meet the College of Policing, Her Majesty's Inspector Constabulary, I'm meeting the Home Secretary pretty potentially, and I'll be advocating, pushing her for more equality, fair and equitable treatment for officers and staff from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds. I attend kind of do a lot of press stuff. I was on BBC Breakfast last week speaking about UK Jimmy that jumped into the River Thames on
Mm.
David Granger. And I put in my Twitter feed that I was putting him forward for George Cross. So BBC Breakfast wanted to speak to me about that. I've done LB3 for BBC Radio 4. I was part of the New York Times actually interviewed me as well just to get my take and opinion on policing in America with
Mm.
the Institute for American Police Reform at the minute as well to try and share some of the learning from Northern Ireland out into the United States as well. So a lot of high profile opportunities, I suppose, for policing in Northern Ireland to be showcased on a national but potentially international stage, but also allowing us to really have a large voice advocating for fair and equitable treatment, which is what's always lost whenever we're chatting about equality. People see it as other people don't. Whenever I joined the police, it's well, you only get in because you're from an ethnic minority. If I get promoted, I'm only getting promoted because I'm from an ethnic minority. So
To
for me,
hit
it's
that mark or
hit the
whatever.
targets and everything else. And I'm like, no, it's not like that at all. And again, we chat about positive discrimination and positive action. People don't understand that positive action is needed, and positive action is only about leveling the playing field. And again, me coming from the majority community background in Northern Ireland, from a Protestant community, coming into policing, I was one of the majority, so I understand what it is like to have a majority viewpoint and not understand that can lead to some bias, that can lead to some kind of just viewpoints that are completely different and that doesn't appreciate, I suppose, the minority kind of background or the minority experiences. So for me,
Mm.
that's something that I've really used to push forward. As I said, I think those 80% of officers and staff across the UK really want to get out there and keep people safe, really make a difference for all communities that they serve. But a lot of them just don't understand that the systems and processes that have been in policing and that have been there for quite a while that work to the detriment of ethnic minority communities. And what we're doing is we're competing this, and it's not the systems and processes we're breaking up. I'd spoken at one stage about institutional racism, and it was largely around the Cressida Dick coming out saying that she didn't believe that the Metropolitan Police were institutionally racist. For me as a police officer, I disagree with that. But policing to say whether we're institutionally racist or not, I think that's up to the community. And if the community constantly tell us that we are, then we have to look at that. And institutional racism isn't about every single officer being racist. It's about our systems and processes working to the detriment of ethnic minority communities. through all the data that we collect, stop search wise in England and Wales, you're 9 times more likely to be stop searched if you're black. You're twice as likely to have if you're black. You're twice as likely to die in police custody if you're black as well. So there's a lot of things external to policing that we have, and I don't think that specifically targeting the black community. I do think there are some that do, and I think there's some that just do not want to understand the black community, but getting their thought processes and getting their information about the black community from TV, from social media, from a lot of things that really push it across, from all of the knife crime stuff we chat about. That's what people are seeing, and
Mhm.
that they're forgetting that that's a small minority of people that are engaged in that type of behaviour. The black community in general, there are so many great things in that community, and because we're not going in and having those informal interactions and engagement sessions that we used to have, we're not able to break down those kind of the racist ideology that is built up over time. And again, it's I always chat about the racial bias and racism. For me, we're
Mm.
all biased. We're all biased, and we're all racially
Oh
biased.
yeah, absolutely.
Everybody is. It's not just a thing for the white community. It's everybody's biased, and I have heard different ethnicities talk about each other in a negative way as well, and use language which I wouldn't be comfortable with at all. For me, the push for equality is about creating a level playing field for all, and what you have to do is go in and make things right that way. For me, it's about empowering our officers to understand that the community is a lot more than those that actually are engaged in that serious crime, that are engaged in drugs. What we find through stop searches that we target the black community quite a bit. As I said, in London, it's 4 times more likely to be stop searched because it's such a more ethnic population. But whenever you get into a lot of
Mm.
the data, 80% of stop searches that we do don't find anything. So 4 out of 5 stops don't find anything, and because we're not engaging treating people with courtesy and respect all the time, that's driving the community further and further away, and it's not allowing us to be
Mhm.
in the community. It's not allowing us to get the community letting us know who's causing most harm in those communities. And policing needs the community to work with us to get information across so that we can put measures in place to target those that are causing the most harm to communities. What some police officers don't understand is that when we defend policing and defend it without thinking about what the community are telling us, then that creates a deeply entrenched view, community further and further away. And all of these organised crime.
Yeah, it's like there needs to be like an acknowledgement of like I hear what you're saying. I experience, so let's get together and figure it
Completely,
out.
completely, because it's like anything. If somebody denies your experience, you're immediately insults you. It drives you further away from them, and nobody's going to engage properly with you. If you understand and come at it from a compassion, empathy kind of way, then you're going to understand what the issues are. You're going to get the community to work with you, and whenever you have the community shifting and turning on those people that are coercing them, that are forcing them to take or to deal drugs and all of the things that they do, if they start speaking out against that, then that allows the police to actually go in proper. All these crime groups work better in a vacuum, work better in a state where police
Mm.
aren't allowed to come in just the same. And my experiences in Northern Ireland really, and that if we don't get it right, then the kind of, suppose, the community consequences are so much greater for us because we're going to end up with so much disorder. We're potentially officers being shot or injured. I mean, a number of cases in the last few days in Northern Ireland where an officer's house was attacked and the cars were burnt on the driveway, and all of that with an IED planted at our car where a child sat as well. So the threat to officers in Northern Ireland is still real. We still carry firearms off duty as well as to protect ourselves from those that we want to see us as legitimate targets for murder. So for me, I
Mm.
want everybody to learn from what we've went through in Northern Ireland and to put things in place so that we never end up in the same position as to where we have been in Northern Ireland in our darkest days. As I said, things have definitely moved. Even in my career, things have moved so far. Whenever I first joined policing, I used to have to be accompanied by the army. We used to get flown in helicopters. We had army checkpoints all over the place. That doesn't happen now. So we are in a lot better place. But I think for me, it's about pushing on and making sure that we have things in place that kind of, I suppose, bring communities together, but also get to the root causes of crime as well. And a lot of those root causes are race related in other areas. So
Mm.
we might as well get ahead of it now and prevent that being there. But inequality, it's about lack of opportunity, deprivation, and all of these links that we traditionally have. If we can put measures in
Mm.
place to kind of empower young people to do better and give them the opportunities that a lot of other people have, then for me, I think that's where you will have a society that's thriving, a society that works a lot better, and you're empowering the community to look after themselves, so they're going to be less reliant on a policing response and that enforcement action that's sometimes needed.
Sorry, you were talking earlier on about engagement sessions or engagements.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
are they?
So
What
what we
that
used to
was
do,
and why it's not a thing anymore?
well, we had used to have community police officers, we still do, but in 2014, a lot of them were withdrawn, austerity and a number of other measures that were brought in. Budgets were kind of tight, or demand increased, or demand got a lot more complex in the last 10 years as well, with a lot more mental health issues, more complex fraud
Mhm.
cases, things like that nature. So we had to divert community resources away. I think it was a mistake. Some of the lack of engagement and the lack of confidence and trust that a lot of communities actually have in policing at this minute in time. For me, community crime prevention, and it needs to be seen in that light. So we used to go into the community, we used to do football, we used to do just that low level interactions with kids. So if we go in there and they see that I'm not just Inspector George, I'm Andy, I'm a person, and they see beneath the uniform, then they are
Mhm.
more likely to speak to me, to tell me what's happening, and we're able to work with them to alleviate just community problems, because we need to collaborate together. The community need the police, and the police need the community. So it's just about how we function together and how we work together to create better solutions for all.
Yeah, it's like you see me, I see you face to face. We have a connection, or we have a moment experience. We do something together, and you're no longer just the uniform, and I'm no longer just the whatever I may be to
Completely,
whoever might be looking at me. You know, it's
completely.
like take the strip it away, strip it bare, and just two humans having an
Exactly.
experience. I think that's definitely something that is necessary in order for us as a society to grow and to continue to maintain that connection and to be safe and to have that trust between, both sides. Because I think
Yeah,
that's what's missing. It's both sides,
it is.
it's the public and the police trusting in both, like both need to come together.
Completely. And again, trust's only built up over time. It's like any relationship. We cannot just go in and expect the community to trust us. The community can't just expect the police to trust everything either. Those relationships need to be built up over a long period of time. And again, policing, sometimes we just go into communities whenever we want something. So we either go in for recruitment events, or for ethnic minority communities, we go in for hate crime. But communities aren't stupid either. If we only turn up 2 times a year and we're looking at photo opportunity and we put out in social media because we're now engaging with the minority community, that what people want to
Mm.
see is us investing in them in the downtime when we don't need them. That's whenever relationships and trust builds up. And again, for me, I've been working with a number of charities and social enterprises, with the Rio Ferdinand Foundation, with the Irish Football their foundation, with a kind of not for profit in London, kick off at 3, sorry, which again just brings young people together from different backgrounds and does all of the building their skills, resources, and giving them opportunities as well, through apprenticeships, through opportunities in sport and outside of sport as well. So sports really the way of bringing young people together. So it is, but it's what you do with them whenever they're there. Again, it's just
Mm.
key to really drive it out. So we have a number of programs working with the Rio Ferdinand Foundation and the Irish Football Association in Belfast and now in the border area. Celtic FC and Rangers, I've got them to do different community cohesion projects as well. And kick it out, or kick off at 3 is one that I've run tournaments every year for the last 3 years. Didn't run one last year because of COVID, but again, that's bringing 10 or 12 teams from deprived communities as well. So not going to just those usual football teams that you're going to get. What we do is we target those communities that don't have the same opportunities, and then we run a
Mhm.
tournament one day a year, and the winners of that tournament we usually bring over in London. And again, I got to do that in 2019. Brought an East Timor team over to London. I travelled with them and this is what makes it great. I've travelled with them, flew with them, and while I was travelling, they didn't actually believe I was a police officer. So they didn't. They said I was too nice. That's what police officers are like, and they were like, no, all the police ever do is tell us to go, move on, and they're only
Hmm.
ever telling us that we're doing something wrong. And I'm like, somebody's calling the police to go there, and it's about the police having to react. So it's this understanding that police officers are people, the community aren't actually up to no good. If we create that
Absolutely.
initial
It's
concept, if we
it's
do that,
literally like what you're saying there. It's just that's exactly what needs to be said. It's what we need to hear. These people, if you see someone only in one way that they always are,
really,
vice versa, like both, if the police are not going in for community engagement and for experience commute, just having a laugh, like having the crack,
yep,
enjoying experiencing, like then they're only going to see these people specifically what they go there to do.
completely, completely.
It's like a balancing game that needs to be.
For me, as I said, it's crime prevention, and again, we need to work with other people as well. Working with the likes of the Rio Ferdinand Foundation and the Ireland and their foundation. That's us tapping into their resources and letting them go in and do the work in communities that don't always trust us the same. Allow them to kind of show the community that we're actually investing in them, that we actually want to work with them, not do stuff to them, but actually work in collaboration with them. Then for me, that
Mm,
really creates this. It's about this more holistic thinking in relation to a lot of the issues that we see around serious violence and all of the organized crime stuff and resurgence of knife crime and things like that. If we only look at it on an enforcement level, then the police, we're never going to do it. In Northern Ireland, the Troubles for a long period, and we had more soldiers, more police, and all that created was a cycle of violence. And the police and the army weren't,
mhm,
for some people, they were obviously part of the problem, but all we did was put more people, locked every town in Northern Ireland down, but there were still bombs and bullets got through, unfortunately. So for me, the thing I learned from that is it takes people to look at things wider. And I think whenever you sit down and talk to people, that's where things come across. And again, my experience of racism was very much around the fact that once people, whenever they meet me initially, it's almost like scales and a tipping point. You'll have, they'll see the difference, so they will, and then over time, similarities, and all of a sudden, the thing that makes us all the same, the things that make us human, that's what people gel to. And as soon as you see that tipping point, that's for me is where people become more accepting and understand that, all of the people that have come here to make Northern Ireland their home, they're only here to make a better life for them and their family. That all of us just want
mm,
to create things for a better life for our children. That's certainly what I want. But looking back at that holistic approach, when once across the board for us dealing with car accidents and those people that have been killed and seriously injured on the roads, we did reduce a lot of those people that were pushing the seatbelt legislation, but through working with those, building up the strategic road network and looking at where accidents occurred quite frequently and accident place, so the road network would maybe build, a straight part of the road where a big corner used to be. They might cut down a
mhm,
lot of trees to make it more visible at certain, we work with the technology or the car companies to make safe technology better with airbags and side impact bars, and all of these measures together reduce
mm,
those killed and seriously injured. And if we want to overcome knife crime or drug dealing, what we need to look at is all of the issues and what makes people drawn to that kind of behavior, and then putting measures in place to stop it. And that's the kind of
yeah,
thinking that we need. It's, what we have at the minute is some police officers targeting entire communities or targeting entire communities based on the actions of a few. And this community engagement piece is for me the way of breaking those kind of preconceived ideas down, because you get to see this young fellas just trying to do what they can. They're trying to stay away from the gangs, but because they don't have the same opportunities, they're almost drawn into it. And the gangs know how to end
mhm.
up trying to they exploit that in young people as well. And there needs to be that mind frame that they're being exploited, so they are as well. And then that's where we I think have a big opportunity to make things different.
Absolutely. So I guess my next question has to do with the Garda, and if you have any advice or any things that you think that they should be thinking about, because obviously this is not just a Northern Ireland issue or just a UK issue or just an American issue. It's around the world.
It is. Well, I have actually been working with Garda Síochána for a number of years now on their diversity inclusion stuff. Assistant Commissioner Paula Hillman, who has just went down there, I was speaking to her last week. And again, what I'm doing tomorrow and on Thursday is actually working with some of those guards in certain areas around Dublin to let them see, to speak to them like this, really, and let them see, one, what it's like for me as an ethnic minority person growing up in Northern Ireland, but then why we need to understand different communities and what it's like for some of the communities as well. So we are putting some measures in place for the guards to kind of modernise and I suppose accept that diversity. They probably have quite an issue with low representation. I know I don't even think they have data on how many they have, but it's quite low. So it is, and I think for me, if they want to make the Garda Síochána a more inclusive police force or service that represents the communities, all the communities in Northern Ireland, then they definitely need to do a bit more work and getting it right and putting it in place. But it's not just them; they also need the backup from government and they need the backup from
Mm,
those councillors in the community as well to come forward and work with them. In Dublin, I'm working with
yeah,
Sports Against Racism Ireland and the Rio Ferdinand Foundation as well are now working down in Mayo, down in Dublin as well now shortly, hopefully, and they're working with the UEFA Foundation to try and replicate some of the programs we have, some of the local guards to actually start working with the community a bit more. So there is a
yeah,
lot of work to be done. I think the guards after the shooting and a few other things, I think there needs to be an acceptance that more needs to be done, and I think it's the whole bit of chatted about. It's about the guards understanding how the community feels and why the community feels the way they do, but also
mhm,
for the community to understand and work better with the guards. I think at times as well because
yeah,
there is obviously the whole narrative out there, with killing of George Floyd and where everything else sits. It's not just about the killing of George Floyd. It's about the inequality and discrimination which people from ethnic minorities have suffered their entire life. For me,
yeah,
watching George Floyd be killed the way he was, and somebody that is meant to be there to look after him and to protect him, to sit on his neck for 8 minutes 46 seconds was
yeah,
it was frightening. But again, the fact that he felt emboldened to do that, that he felt beyond, he wasn't going to be held accountable because even whenever somebody's
yeah.
filming, he still sits there with his sunglasses on, and and obviously,
It's like,
thankfully,
what are you
they've
gonna
got.
do?
It's like I don't care what happens to this person because nobody else will, and that's for me that the
Mm,
whole words around I can't breathe that resonated with everybody as well because that's how I felt whenever I was a 6-year-old in the circus. That's how I
mm,
felt whenever the guys were starting to racially abuse me and then assault me. That's how I felt whenever I was sitting in the police stations and people come out with their low level racist abuse, which is really what it was, or just their racial comments. That's how I felt, being the only person that looked different to the entire majority
mm,
workforce. That's what it felt like. It felt like I couldn't breathe on stage. I got that knot in my stomach. And you're almost anticipating a lot of the time. So it's
yeah,
understanding that communities across Ireland and Southern Ireland, all of those communities are actually really tightly knit as well. So one negative experience in Dublin or Belfast reverberates around those communities really quickly. So we are
yeah,
just so interconnected, and that's what the guards need to understand. We get see a lot of stuff on social media as well, and that is secondary trauma as well because when we see that in our daily lives, I don't think that policing in the UK or in Ireland is at the same level as American police. I think America has its own unique challenges which real need a real hard look at themselves in America. We're not at that
yeah,
position, but I think we're in a position where communities in Ireland want to work with the police, both An Garda Síochána and police service in Northern Ireland. But if we don't
yeah,
start better, and start engaging with them better, then that door will close. And what we will have is we
Yeah.
will have issues like they have in London now, where communities don't want to speak to the police. And as I said, that's not good for anybody. It's not good for the community. It's not good for the police, and it's not good for society in general.
I think that the what you were talking about earlier about the engagement stuff, I think that that's so important and should be adopted by every police force everywhere. Like if you are connected to the police force on a human level, it makes it easier then to be around them or to see them as a human versus see them as the
It's that connection, me standing in uniform, I can gain the trust and respect of ethnic minority communities a lot quicker than my white counterparts. Not because I'm any better, but because all of a sudden there's somebody in policing that understands what their daily lives are like, that understands what racism's like, that understands what it's like to be discriminated against. That's what it all represents. And me standing in uniform creates a bigger connection for ethnic minority communities with policing in general. And that's across the board. That's just about rapport building. If we have a Protestant officer that goes into a Catholic community in Northern Ireland and they're starting to speak to them about GAA, the disconnect sometimes is going to be there. Whereas if you have somebody that is culturally competent and aware of the communities they're serving and are able to go in, if you start speaking about Gaelic or rugby or something that's real common, that's how you're going to build up the rapport. That's how you're going to build up the
yeah,
whole bit that you understand me, you might understand my issues, and you might be able to then alleviate some of the concerns that I have and sort them out for me. But if we don't have that
yeah.
connection to policing, then the community will just kind of not bother. They'll find other ways of either policing themselves or of just completely absorbing that discrimination and the abuse that they're getting.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a couple of sides to the coin. There's like the policing side to it. There's the be just being a human side to it, and then there's, some kind of almost training needs to be done for to help people, to help police officers and to help, the communities to be able to work cohesively and to be in the same, you know, wavelength, to go along the same path together
Definitely.
versus always feeling like they're apart.
Definitely. And this us defending ourselves blindly in policing, that just drives a wedge further and further between the communities. For me, it's you
Yeah,
know it, that there's definitely a training element. I think we can educate our way out of a lot of things, but it needs to be. There's been a lot of discussion around unconscious bias training and stuff. Unconscious bias training as a standalone product will never overcome anything. But if we put a
mhm,
diversity and inclusion piece across everything we do. If we do all of our training has a diversity inclusion piece, if all of our, and that goes from us going into training centre for 6, 7 months initially, if we're chatting about the different communities and not just looking at community as one homogenous group, if we're looking at community across the board, because we have our, you'll have your majority white, also then your ethnic minority populations, but within your ethnic
mm,
minority populations, you'll have your various African communities, your Afro Caribbean, your Asian, and then you break that down for populations which has Indian and Pakistani and how many different types and histories that they have, and they don't get on in some ways. And understanding communities at different levels and understanding the difference in communities and how we need to kind of target our approach to meet the community's needs first and foremost, because I firmly
mhm.
believe most police officers and guards in Ireland don't want to offend or generally don't want to offend, don't know what to say or do or is right. So I think there's an obligation for us as well to help upskill them and to really push on
Yeah, yeah,
and let those guards see. Afraid to ask me what I want to be called or where I want, how I want to be described. Don't be afraid to ask me
yeah,
or ask colleagues, if they're from a Muslim background in the relation to Ramadan, what do you need in relation to burials. Don't be afraid to ask these questions for awful lot of
yeah,
people because that's going to end up just making us better. It's connected to the
yeah.
communities we serve, and that's
It's like,
good
yeah,
for all.
we all have to learn how to communicate to each other on
Completely,
a base.
completely.
Take the policing and the public outside of it and boil it down to, on a basic level, we need to learn how to communicate with people who don't specifically look like, who have different cultural
Completely.
ways, who have different heritages.
Yeah.
And then once we start and the other things on top, if we are a foundation of how to communicate with people, it leads for a more successful life in general, not just
No,
in policing, but specifically now that we're in policing.
but as you said, and communication is key, and the key to communication is you're sending a message, but you're also making. I think even working with
Mm,
communities, and I work with a lot of communities in Belfast, trying to push and make sure that they're guided right and where they need to go and what they need to do to work better together as well. I think what communities and what I sometimes, as the National Black Police Association president, have to get across is even though I'm sending out a message, doesn't mean that it's going to land well. So I need to understand not only what I want to get across, but I need to deliver it in a way that those that I want to get that message to can understand it. And that's policing. That goes both ways. The community can't just expect police officers that are from white majority backgrounds. They understand everything about the community, but police officers as well can't just expect the communities and those that have just arrived in Ireland as well. They understand sometimes the way the criminal justice system works, and we can't just send out one message and expect it to land with every single community in the same way. So we need to
yeah,
be targeted in our approach as well and understand that those messages need to have that cultural awareness in each piece so that we're not kind of disengaging in any particular community.
absolutely. Gosh, well, I mean, I could talk to you like literally all day about all of this stuff. Um, but I'll try and keep it short and sweet. Move on to almost I guess my second to last question, unless there's, anything else. And I've been doing these interviews, always like I asked into how parents come together to have us. And then the other thing that I'm really interested in is how you, and just, to have that conversation because at the moment, I'm struggling with how I identify. Of my life, I would always have just said I was mixed race. And then I started to just question that a little bit, like, mixed, like and then there's not just the human race. And then I'm just like,
Like for me, as you said, I was much like yourself. It would have been mixed race, and I didn't think much of it as well. Obviously, dual heritage is one that started to come up now as well, which is probably a bit easier for us. And again, it's I suppose it's down to that self identification piece. Um, I've probably come to terms with a lot more over the years. I'm 41 now. Whenever I was younger, I didn't. As you said, I was conflicted. I didn't know what I was at times. I seen myself very much as Northern Irish, so I did, but not society in general didn't always see me that way. And then you go to, I go over to England then quite a bit, and them seeing somebody that looks like me with a Northern Irish accent is just blows their mind. It's what for me it's worked as a positive because it's allowed me to break down a lot of barriers really quickly. It's a unique selling point, I think, almost, and it's allowed me to become president where others might not have been able to have that opportunity. But it does not drain. It would have drained me in the past. I think, as you said, it's the whole bit about mixed heritage and mixed race. The mixed race piece, that's just what I would have said. Mixed race, white, white and Asian is what I would always have put down. But it's it's down to, I suppose, what people really want. We'll look at gender and where the gender pieces go and stuff like that around the self-identification, without obviously getting it to the point where somebody from a white Northern Irish background can say that they're from an ethnic minority without any merit. I do think we just kind of have to engage better. I think because a lot of the time the labels we use are almost set by the majority, with not always the biggest consultation.
I think that's exactly my issue. It's like, I feel like one of us needs to come up with a new word.
Yeah, yeah, and that's it. It's but again because they're not engaging with us the same and having the proper consultations, they're not going to move on them just as much as they need to. So for me, it's just understanding that people, and what we have to realize as well, I suppose, is it is a consensus because you might disagree with the way I want to describe myself, and I suppose for large public bodies and stuff, they need to get to some sort of position where they can agree that it's going to be X, Y, or Z. Otherwise, we don't have
Mm,
uniform structures in place to monitor stuff. And again, for me, I suppose, as long as we have had a say in what we're defined as, and again,
yeah.
through the National Black Police Association, we have had this discussion quite a bit. And whenever they're doing a lot of the counting stuff, the Home Office will do data collection around ethnicity. They didn't have a Black British or a Black Asian, or sorry, a British Asian classification. It just had white British, and then Afro Caribbean, Black African, Black or Asian, and it had a number of different bits. So they're mixing up nationality with ethnicity for a start. But as well as that, I see myself as Northern Irish, and then I suppose the Asian bit then comes after it. So, should I be able to
Mm.
just define as an Irish Asian, Northern Irish white, Northern Irish black, or, Irish white, Irish black, Irish, for me, that's probably a better way of doing it, because I grew up and I was born in Northern Ireland, so I don't see that I shouldn't be seen as anything more than Northern Irish. But from an
Yeah,
ethnicity point of view, then I'm very proud of having Asian heritage as well. So that would need to be
yeah,
put across. So my nationality is Northern Irish, and my ethnicity is dual heritage or Asian, and that could be down as Northern Irish Asian or Northern Irish Black for some people, or whatever. But for
yeah.
me, if you put that country of origin down first, it means that you're accepting people as being part of the society in Northern Ireland or Ireland or Britain, and
Exactly. And you're
that's
getting
the key
away
bit.
from that question that we started off with. Where are you really from? Like
Exactly.
it's just taken away from that. Like there is no
Yeah.
really from. I'm from
Yeah.
Ireland, or in your case, I'm from Northern Ireland.
Yeah, completely. And that's, you take that away, then all of a sudden you're actually making everybody feel part of society. And to the majority, you're opening them up to say that Ireland, you can be Irish without being white. And I think even working
Hmm.
outside of Northern Ireland and Ireland, a lot of people don't see that, because we, our ethnic mix, I suppose, in Northern Ireland hasn't always been there as great as other places. We didn't probably have the large influx in Windrush. And even beyond that, you get into the education piece around the slave trade and around the empire and different bits. And you look then
Yeah,
at black and Asian people were coming into Ireland and Northern Ireland and into Britain a lot more than, they think that it went for 300-400 years, and that we were colonizing loads of different countries, and that people weren't coming back here at an earlier stage. So it didn't just happen in Windrush. You can go back to the
yeah,
Romans, I suppose, and there's different black Romans that come to come to the British Isles and Ireland at different times. But for me, it's just let us be Northern Irish, and then our ethnicity
mhm,
second. Because for me, that's what I see myself as, very much Northern Irish, and then Asian beyond it. And Dad would almost say that he's been here from '74, so he has more or less, or '77 and around that, and a large portion of his life has been spent here, and he would almost see himself that way. He still likes
mhm,
going back to Malaysia where he's from, but he still sees us as home. And for me, that's the key
mhm.
thing. It's those also second generations that grow up and live here and that were born here. For me, that's it. Yes, I'm Northern Irish, and then I'm Asian after that.
Awesome. Well, Andy George, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, discussing with you, and communicating with you on a basic human level.
No, no, appreciate it. No, it's been great chatting to you as well. I really enjoyed it as well.
Thank you for tuning in to Irish Roots. Irish Roots is a completely volunteer led festival. If you can donate, please do. For more information and to see what else is happening, jump over to our website. It's www.iamirish.org. From all of us at I Am Irish,